Good morning. It's time for High Five and Happy Tuesday. We're talking about the Song of Solomon this week. And, people think it's a mushy kind of women kind of thing. I think my best teacher of this is Mike Bickle of let's see, the House of, let's see, IHOP, IHOP in Kansas City, International House of Prayer, and he had an experience with the Lord about a scripture he had seen on a wedding invitation, and the power of God came all over him, and he told his secretary, "Don't bother me, don't give me any phone calls," and when he got the phone call, he got a message from his secretary that Bob Jones is on the line. He needs to speak with you, and so he answered that call because Bob Jones was a spiritual father, and he listens to everything he had to say. He's now in heaven, but we're still listening to what he had to say. And when he talked to Bob Jones, Bob said, God said, "I'm on my way to the airport. I can't talk much, but God says I'm supposed to give you the message." And he gave him the scripture, that same scripture that was on that wedding invitation, and it was from the Song of Solomon. He said, "This is going to be your ministry for the rest of his life." So he sat down to read. He was so excited about it, and he sat down to read Song of Solomon. And he thought, "Oh my gosh, what have you done with me, Lord? You've given me a girly book to be my ministry." And it's not a girly book. That Jesus said that the whole Bible all the scriptures talk about him. And Matthew Henry was best known for his complete commentaries in 1706. George Whitfield read it 4 times. Matthew Henry really did a great job on the Song of Solomon. And George Whitfield read it 4 times, the last time on his knees. Spurgeon said every minister ought to read it entirely and thoroughly through at least once. I really like Watchman Nee. Watchman Nee has got he has a book on the Song of Solomon, and it is really excellent. I highly recommend it. I actually made, I think the reason that people have so much trouble with the Song of Solomon, it is so full of idioms. I always say if somebody from another country, if I said, "Well, just go to the fork in the road," they would go out there looking for a knife and a fork and a spoon, utensils, because they wouldn't understand that that's an idiom. We know that when we come to a fork in the road, we have a decision to make this way or that way. And that's what that means. And sometimes a fork in the road actually is the road turning 2 different ways, and you have to choose which direction to go. And yes, Holly, Brian Simmons has it from the Passion Translation, the Song of Solomon, and it is excellent. I don't agree with everything he says on it. He goes just a different way than I do. But, there's a natural interpretation, and it's a story about a husband, a wife, a lover wooing a maiden being wooed by the king and love. A story of a maiden with a poor shepherd boy taken by the king. All of it speaks about love. But when you come to the point, what are you going to do with Luke 24:27 in the Amplified? It writes, "Then beginning with Moses and throughout the scripture, Jesus went on explaining and interpreting to them in all the scriptures the things concerning and referring to himself." I really believe that the Song of Solomon has to do with the relationship with Jesus and the church. Jesus as king and the church as the bride. Israel is the bride and God as the bridegroom is the way the Jewish people look at this interpretation. It's a scroll that's read every year on Passover with the Jewish people. They read this on Passover because they look at this as God being wed to Israel. But Jesus is married to the church. We find that in Matthew 25:1. "And the kingdom of heaven is likened unto 10 virgins that took their lamp and went to meet the bridegroom." Romans 7:4. that you may be married to another, to him who has raised from the dead. 2 Corinthians 11:2. For I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ. And as, again in Ephesians 5:31-32, Revelation 19:7, Revelation 21:2. And Matthew Henry wrote, when we apply ourselves to the study of this book, we must not only with Moses and Joshua put off our shoe from our foot, or even forget that we have bodies, because the place where we stand is holy ground, but we must with John come up hither, must spread our wings, take a noble flight, and soar upwards, till our faith and holy love as we enter the holiest, for this is no other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. He said that about the Song of Solomon. And we need to just come into a different mindset when you come into Song of Solomon. Just like with the book of Revelation is a lot of Jewish idiom. The book of the Song of Songs is full of idioms. And one more thing, and I know I've gone way over, but one more thing. Kerry Kirkwood from up in Tyler, Texas, he was on Sid Roth, and he made a comment that his mother would read to him from the Song of Solomon as a bedtime story. I thought that was kind of interesting, because most Jewish boys aren't even able to read the book of Song of Solomon until they're 30 years old. They can't even get into it. So that's something for you to think about today. Have a glorious day in Jesus. Bye-bye.